Tennessee a big winner over South Carolina here on this Saturday. 45-20 the final score. 38 first half points, 28 in the first quarter. Austin, it was another game where Tennessee jumped out of the gates and really kind of won that game in the first quarter.
Yeah, they jumped out. They were up 38-7 at halftime, and then kind of took the foot off the gas, got a little lackadaisical, a little boring in the second half. They did tack on a touchdown late. I told Ben before the game that I thought Lenneth Whitehead would score a touchdown because on Al Wilson Day, number 27 needs to make a touchdown. Sure enough, he did. And so this is a Tennessee football team that continues to get more confident. Sure they can clean up some things. I know that'll be something that Josh Heupel harps on all week. They gotta learn to finish. Yeah, sure, we started great, guys, but we didn't finish. We gotta learn to finish. Part of that was on play calling. Part of it was on lack of execution. And so this is a football team that Ben has really kind of turned the corner. Now again, does that mean they can beat Ole Miss a week from now? No, Ole Miss can score, and so that game could end up being a really high-scoring shootout. But you have to feel good about Tennessee the rest of the way, especially with Hendon Hooker at quarterback. He just makes everything seem so much more smooth than what we saw early in the year.
Yeah, it kind of stinks that Tennessee had the second half that it did, because that's your lasting feeling, your lasting image of what was a big blowout win, quite frankly, over South Carolina. I thought the offense was absolutely awesome in the first half, and I think that should be the primary the center of the conversation going forward this week as we put a bow on South Carolina, is that Tennessee's offense dominated in the first half, and I will chalk the second half up to taking the foot off the gas. You had multiple players allude to it. Josh Heupel alluded to a loss of focus that led to the second half. So I don't think that was truly Tennessee's offense sputtering against a bad defense. I think the conversation should be that first half, and it showed that Tennessee's going to be able to put up points this year. Maybe not against Alabama or Georgia. We'll see in the coming weeks, but a game next week against a bad Ole Miss defense, Tennessee should absolutely be able to put up some points. I think Hendon Hooker is playing phenomenal football right now, and I think the best thing is that he's not turning the football over, and that gives you a chance all day long to win a football game.
I want to say this is the third game this year that he's scored 4 total touchdowns. I have to go back and check, but I know it's not the first. And I would second that. I think Hendon Hooker's playing incredible football right now. Tennessee 8-9 on third downs in the first half. Tyne Evans again had another long touchdown run, got himself over the century mark. Tennessee did a lot well in this game, won the turnover battle again. Ben, I'll start with you on this one. I asked Austin this after the Missouri game. With what that's coming, Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, a win like last week, a win like today, I mean, how much confidence does that give you inside that locker room moving forward that says, hey, you can score on anybody, you can play with anybody?
It has to give you a lot of confidence because, like you just said, you've been able to put up points just about on anybody. And even the Florida game, if Jimmy Callaway makes that catch on fourth down and Tennessee's able to punch the ball in, I mean, it's a 24-21 football game going into the fourth quarter in the Swamp. So 21 points, not a ton compared to the last 2 weeks, but Florida's defense much better than Missouri's defense or South Carolina's defense. So you're really getting into the meat of the schedule, and Georgia's defense is just different than the defenses that Tennessee has been putting up points against, and same can be said for Alabama. But even still, this is a big boost to the confidence, and that's the biggest thing you want going into that type of football game. Sure, you may be outnumbered from a talent perspective and a personnel perspective, but at least Tennessee has that confidence, and at least they're clicking on all cylinders, and who knows, you go in there and you give yourself a chance to win.
Austin, Jalen Hyatt got involved early and often, 2 receptions on that opening drive, and then of course found the end zone. A lot of people have question marks about how the staff is using Jalen Hyatt, but hey, I thought today was a big day for him.
Well, the touchdown catch was a heck of a grab. Yeah. I mean, in traffic, full extension, snag on a heater. To me, that ought to get him some confidence. That was a big time catch. When Tennessee needed it to start the football game, they tried to get him involved with a wrinkle play a couple other times, and South Carolina just snuffed it out. One time, I thought Hendon Hooker could have floated the pass and hit him and probably would have gained, maybe 10 yards. The other time, they just had it red and there was nothing there. But, I think it's good to kind of get him going. Again, this is a wide receiving core that's kind of odd to me because, Javonte Payton gets a target early, catches a touchdown early, and then is nowhere to be found
That's all
the rest
she
of the
wrote.
game. I mean, it's
every game. Every game.
I mean, like at this point, he's on pace for 12 catches, 10 touchdowns on the year. I mean, it's remarkable. But yeah, I mean, they got to continue to work guys, get them more involved. I thought Cedric Tillman had his best day today. Had some nice catches in traffic. What he ended up with, about 70 yards receiving on the day, 59. On 6 catches, 7 targets. This is a passing game that they've clearly cut down the rotation. But the guys they're feeding have continued to produce, including Velus Jones, who has really been doing well the last few weeks in that slot.
All right, a couple more things before we call quits here. Tennessee obviously not at full health right now. Had a couple more guys banged up in this one. Tylen Evans left late. Josh Heupel said they just made the decision not to put him back in the football game. I would agree with that. Why even risk it? But Jabari Small-Dress was banged up, did not play. Theo Jackson was in street clothes for part of warm-ups, went out there and warmed up for the other half, but he did not play. Danico Slaughter didn't play. And, of course, Cooper Mays, Kingston Harris, the list goes on and on and on. Ben, how important is it for this team to try to get healthy? Of course it is important, but, do you think this team will be a little bit healthier this time next week when Ole Miss comes to town?
It's very important, and Tennessee has to get healthier because at some point all of these injuries are really, really going to come back to bite them in the butt. And you can get away with this amount of injuries against the Missouri, against the South Carolina, but against an Ole Miss offense where you need everybody chipping in, everybody available, pulling their weight. If you don't have those guys, it'll come back to get you. And they've got to get healthy this week. And obviously some of that is just pure luck and whether you can get certain guys healthy. Different guys have different injuries, obviously. But they've got to get healthy because, again, you can get away with this amount of injuries against the Missouri, against the South Carolina, but against the Ole Misses and the Kentuckys, the Bamas, the Georgias, you're going to need everybody because you're going to need help from everybody.
I thought huge today that Tennessee did not have to play Jabari Small.
Yes.
He needed the rest.
Theo.
He could have played, yes. But Theo at least went through warm-ups, and I know Jabari did too. But Theo looked fine out there moving around, whereas Danico Slaughter was seriously limping.
But you saw guys Brandon Turnage stepping up.
Yeah, Turnage stepped up. Yeah, and I think that's huge because Willie's so trust-oriented. If he doesn't trust, then he struggles to play. Today, if Brandon Turnage didn't earn his trust, I don't know how else you could because he played really, really well.
He did.
Drawing praise from Heupel afterwards, was all smiles. For a kid that, kind of everybody, felt like, well, he went to Georgia only because he was promised a spot, and then he left because he wasn't going to be the starting corner anymore, and he could be a problem here. I heard that narrative pushed a lot when he decided to come here. Kid has been above board on everything he's done, so big smiles from him today. He's happy, and tickled with the way he played. So again, as Ben pointed out, not having to play Theo, not having to play Slaughter, not having to play Jabari Small. Jalen Wright didn't play today. To me, that's a real win. Elijah Simmons did not have to play today. Get a week further down the line. Cooper Mays dressing out today is interesting to me because that tells me, and I'd heard it, and I'd heard he is really progressing rapidly. Now, does that get him back for next week? I don't know. I think if he doesn't play next week, I sure wouldn't play him against Alabama, and then he gets the bye week and he comes back fully ready to go against Kentucky, one would imagine. Yeah. But, to me, that's an interesting dynamic going into next week because, you may need, defense or the offensive line did give up 6 sacks to the South Carolina defense today, so you may need a guy like Cooper back next week if he can give you anything. Even if he and Carvin rotate and he gives you, every third series. That's better than not at all.
Yeah, what it tells me is if he was in pads today, it means if Carvin went down, he could have went in and played. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but why? If you're unavailable, why are you dressed out? So I would agree that is kind of interesting, even though you might not should be out there playing, but if you had to, you could go. And so it looks like he's progressing, and we'll have to see about next week. Big recruiting weekend. We'll wrap up on this. Ben, you and I were over at Catholic last night. Lipscomb Academy, a big winner over Catholic. We talked with a couple of prospects, and Caleb Beasley, the Spillmans, and of course Trent Dilfer. That's up on the front page right now and on the board. Austin, 3 officials in here today, ton of unofficials. Who were some of the highlights of the weekend, and some people will be talking to over the next couple of days.
Well, obviously, the main two to me. I mean, no offense to Brian Grant, but he's committed. The other two official visitors are Davison, and I'm not even going to try to attempt to pronounce the last name. The kid that was committed to Rutgers. He had to like what he saw today. Tennessee, played good defense, and the same thing with Joshua Josephs. If you could say anything about today, is Tennessee didn't really get to the quarterback. They need a Leo. They need two of them. They had two of them. They're top two on the board. Joshua Josephs and James Pierce right down the recruiting section today. So Pierce did make it in with his teammate, Dalen Smothers, and so that's twice unofficially. I mean, I don't want to say Tennessee's the leader, but I would consider them the leader at this current moment for James Pierce. Correct, but it's not. Anytime you have to go through the mountains, trust me. I mean, I've talked to enough recruits over the years where it's like, I don't want to go through the mountains. I have to get up early at 4 a.m. to leave to get over there to to be able to partake in the stuff they want to get. Yeah. So I just feel like that to have those guys here to play the way they did defensively, to have the atmosphere again. Was it perfect? No. But I think that Tennessee's got some juice in recruiting right now. They had a bunch of solid players here today. We'll see what happens next week. Who makes it in? I think next week's a perfect candidate weekend for an unofficial visit from Walter Nolan.
Maybe a 5-star quarterback or two.
Yeah, and we'll see who out for the 23 class.
Yes.
And then we'll see who else makes it in. From across the in-state players.
Yeah, and that committed class is going to try to make an effort to be here against Ole Miss. Numerous of those guys have told me they're going to be in attendance. Final score 45-20. Ben, any closing remarks here on a day that was all Vols there early on and finished off all in orange?
Got the job done. 4-2 through the first half of the season, and I think there's truly something to be said of that. You and I talked about preseason expectations and people assuming that Missouri and South Carolina were ahead of Tennessee because their head coaches are media darlings, and Josh Heupel isn't necessarily that. And it was a good reminder the last 2 weeks for Tennessee to remind folks that, hey, Tennessee's still ahead of Missouri and South Carolina, and I think there's something to be said for that.
All right, Ben McKee, Austin Price, I'm Eric Cain. Tennessee a winner today over South Carolina, 45-20 here at Neyland Stadium.